Nick, welcome to another episode. Short story long with Marnie and Nick, episode 5. How you doing, mate?
Good, man. I can't believe it's episode 5. It feels like yesterday. This sounds super cliche, but
Yeah.
it feels like only a couple of days ago that we recorded episode 1 and we had no
Hmm.
idea what we were doing. I mean, now in saying that, it's not like we're experts now, but like
Nah,
we definitely
not at
have a
all.
better sense of what's going to happen and what's going on and, who does what, who says what. So very excited for number 5.
Absolutely. I think my biggest apprehension, like pre episode 1, was like, oh, we've never done one of these things before. What if we say something we're not supposed to say and then it's a public podcast, blah, blah, blah. So, like, we were talking about should we even do this thing? And I think,
Yeah.
yeah, the reception so far has been pretty good. And it's not that we're super controversial figures, anyways. I think the things that we
Yep.
say are pretty sensible. Some of the things we say are things that most people are already thinking about, or it might be some things that people are not thinking about in the perspective that we think. So, yeah, I think it's been valuable so far. I've got some positive feedback from the episodes that we've already done. And yeah,
Yeah.
looking forward to this one.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Um, I thought we kick things off today with going back to the start because we forgot to do this, which is very typical about the both of us actually, is introductions.
Mm,
And I think it'll be good to tell the audience what we do for work, why we do the things we do, and like zoom out of that as well and just talk about like our purpose and why we chose to do the things we do, as well as a lot of the extracurricular activities that we do, whatever
mm.
they may be. So why don't you kick off and then I'll roll on from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not that we forgot to introduce ourselves. I think what we did was we just briefly told people what we do for a living. And then we spent most of episode 1 talking about our childhood upbringing in Singapore, which is that common
True.
thread that we both share. So, yeah, we kind of filled the audience in on what we were like as kids and what our upbringing was. But I guess today's focus is on our adult lives, what we've done from like age 18 onwards, so to speak. And yeah,
Mm.
how we got to where we are now. So yeah, absolutely. To give you like a bit of a timeline on what's happened, for me, I graduated from high school and did a
Yeah.
bachelor's of civil engineering. That was at Monash. Graduated in the 4 years that it takes to graduate that degree. Jumped straight into the workforce out of that, working as a engineering consultant. So that is an engineer that does design work. So as engineers, you can kind of work in government field, you can work in design field, or you can work in construction. Those are kind of like the three general things. I mean, engineering is very broad. There's many more options than that, but those are three broad categories. I always
Mm.
wanted to do design, so that's what I jumped into. Did that for a couple of years, and then left that for just over a year to work in education. So did that for just over a year, and then came back to engineering. Tried to juggle the engineering and education thing for quite a while. And now I would say I'm kind of 99% an engineer, and I dabble with some education things here and there. And yeah, since we're talking about the extracurricular piece as well, I've always had this common through line of music that I've tried
Mm.
to have on the side of all the engineering work that I do. So whether that be teaching drums or playing drums in a band, those are kind of, or having like a YouTube channel where I
Yeah.
released content on drumming. That's always been like something that I've tried to have as part of my weekly schedule as I worked.
Interesting. Interesting. There's like so many, it's such a weird mix of things.
Yes.
Engineer, music, they almost like to me, I feel like they don't go together. I'm
Yeah.
reading a book right now actually
Hmm.
called Visual Thinking.
Okay. Yeah.
People can
Cool.
see that. Not really. Kind
Yep.
of, yeah.
Yep.
Um, and essentially it was talking about how like essentially there are different kinds of thinking in the world. Long story short, there are people with, on occasion, you'll find people with very like odd mix of activities. So like rocket scientists who love poetry, or like yourself, engineers who like music, or like musicians who enjoy like coding or something like that. But it's
Mm.
like a side thing that they do and they just have fun.
Yeah.
And it scratches that like that itch for them,
Yeah.
oddly
It's
enough.
it's interesting. I want to jump to you in a second, but it's interesting you say that it's like a weird combination of engineering and music. But what some people might not know is there's actually a lot of mathematical, logical thinking in music and in drumming in particular. So drumming is really just rhythms, and rhythms is just subdivisions of time. So like without getting too nerdy, it's kind of like you
I was
imagine like
about
a
to say,
like a chocolate bar, and a chocolate bar you can kind of like chop into 4 pieces, or you can chop into
yeah,
8 pieces, or chop into 16 pieces. You can kind of chop it up as many times as you want. You get different sizes of chocolate bars. Now if you can imagine in a very abstract sense, that chocolate bar is a certain amount of time. So it's like 1 second of time is that chocolate bar. And you can chop it up into 4 different pieces and make a sound at the start of each piece, and you get a da 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 da. Or you can chop it up into 2 pieces and you get a da da. And then you kind of mix those two together. You get da 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 da, that sort of thing, and that's a rhythm. So it's really just mathematics, playing with fractions, playing with time. And so, yeah, if you're a maths lover, you're probably going to love engineering and you're going to love music. So it's that same part of the brain that goes in 2 different areas, but definitely there's more creativity to be found in the music side where you can play around with the numbers. And then in engineering, you're not really playing around with the numbers so much. You're just kind of using it to achieve the outcome you want to achieve.
that's so nerdy. I have to say that's so nerdy. Just
It's only on a podcast do I get to give this kind of answer, right? At a dinner party, everyone's already moved on to the next person by the time I
that's
complete that
so,
story.
but it's so interesting because like I'm not a musical person
Yeah,
and I don't think of it in that way and I don't see it in that way when I just watch a musical performance and I'm like, oh wow, like that person's really good. I remember we went to a performance like a month ago now,
yeah, like Christmas time. Yeah,
yeah, Christmas time,
yeah,
and you were like, oh man, like drummer's so good. I'm like, yeah, yeah, but like the way I'm
yeah.
thinking about it is like, oh, the guy's just good. Like I can see, he's
It's
probably got a lot of
comfortable. Yeah,
experience. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
very comfortable. All of that. You're like,
yeah,
oh, you're like, I can see you like being one with the music,
yeah, yeah.
which was, I was like, man, Marty's getting really getting into it. So,
Yeah, always, man. Yeah, you can appreciate it at a deeper level. I guess, like, if you're a painter and you go to a
yep,
museum, you're going to appreciate
true.
like the strokes and like the
That's
I
very
don't even know
true.
what I'm talking about here, so I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
outside of my depth. But basically, you can appreciate it at a deeper level because you've done it.
Yep.
Same thing with music.
That's very true. That's very true. Yeah. Um, so for myself,
Yep.
I did a Bachelor of Health Sciences. And the only reason why actually was because I in high school in year 11, so the second last year of high school, I failed like 3 out of 6 subjects. And because I failed 3 out of 6 subjects, I had to do a whole bunch of different ones.
Yep.
And one of them turned out to be health. I had a really great health teacher, and that was the catalyst to like me being in healthcare. So Bachelor of Health Science. Then after that, first grad role though was in finance, oddly enough.
Interesting. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I was like, ah man, to hell with health. I went into finance and I was like, yeah, I'm not a finance person.
How long did it take you to figure that out? Was it 1 year, 2 years?
I was in the job for almost 2 years.
Yeah.
Almost 2 years, but within like the first 3 months, I was like, yeah, I feel like I'm not gonna enjoy this for very long. I feel like I just don't care.
Gotcha.
Because like
Yeah.
part of my like I worked in like the shares side of things, and part of my job was like um helping some of our very wealthy clients.
Mm.
And I was like, yeah, I don't care if someone gets an extra 50 mil.
Interesting. Yep. So it
Ha-
comes to people and purpose, right? So
Yeah.
for those of you that are listening to the podcast, you can see the title banner down the bottom. We've titled this "People, profits, and purpose. So the reason we've labeled it that, even though we started the podcast saying we're just going to talk about ourselves and our careers and stuff, is we're
Mm,
trying to tap into these three different aspects of, I guess, you could say the criteria for what makes a rewarding career is to think about how it resonates with the people, the community that you serve, how it relates to the purpose, the innate reason for why you're doing what you're doing. And
yeah.
the third one, profits. Obviously, everyone works to make a living, to put food on the table. So, is it
Yep.
profitable? Is it lucrative enough for you for the lifestyle that you want to live? So, yeah, it's interesting. You kind of already kind of tapped onto those two things: the purpose side and the people side. The community didn't really care about the rich folk that you were helping,
Yeah.
and
No, it
yeah,
wasn't even that, man. It was
yeah,
just like it was so the work was so monotonous and it was so there wasn't a lot of purpose to it. There wasn't a lot of meaning to it.
right,
And like to be honest, a lot of my colleagues didn't really care about it as well.
mm,
And they had kind of like no purpose with regards to that particular role, that particular job that they were doing. And it was
yeah,
kind of just like a means to an end sort of situation.
mm,
Um, and then after that, I moved back into healthcare, worked on like electronic health records from the people aspect, from the people side of things.
yep,
And then worked in a hospital, and then here I am now. I work for an organization in Adelaide in the aged care sector. So did like a little bit of a lateral move into aged care. But
mm,
where I work, I've after that, that was a private company. That finance one was a private company. After that, I moved into not-for-profit and or kind of the government space.
yep,
And it's been good. I really enjoy it. Like everyone is very altruistic.
mm,
Yeah.
yep.
Everyone I work with is very, very altruistic, very, very purpose driven, and very like, oh, this needs to serve a purpose. Otherwise, like, why are we doing it? Sort of,
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, that's the take that people always take.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's great, and that brings you to the present day, I guess. So a few
Mm.
changes. The major ones being going from finance into healthcare, and then healthcare into aged care. So
Yep.
those are like your big changes. Like you said, one of them's kind of a lateral move, the aged care to healthcare thing, and I guess
Pretty
the
much.
finance to the healthcare piece is more you sort of coming back to your roots, like where you belong, sort of thing, from the
Yep.
degree that you that you did. Okay, yeah, no, that's really interesting, and I guess the way we want to drive the rest of this podcast is we want to drive it through the pillars of people, profits, and what was the third one?
Purpose.
Purpose. Yeah. So what would you like to start with, Nick?
I reckon let's start with purpose.
Okay. All right. Let's
And the
do that.
reason why I say that is because I think it is very, very important to know the purpose, like your purpose, and based on that, build your life around that, right? I
Mm,
think if you don't know your purpose, like if you don't know why you're here, if you don't know why you're doing the things you're doing, if you don't know why you're hanging around the people that you're hanging around with, it makes life very, very difficult. And I think no matter what kind of things that you do, it wouldn't necessarily fill the void that you might feel.
mm, interesting. Okay. Yeah.
So
Cool.
how
Yep.
about we start with that? So purpose. I am curious before I mentioned
Mm,
that you hopped around from engineering to education
yep.
and then back. And on top of that, knowing you personally, I know you do a bunch of like, you teach drums, all that sort of stuff on the side. Why has that education piece been so important to you? And why did you jump out and
Mm,
then jump back in?
okay. Yeah. Cool. So there's. I want to answer another question, but I also want to answer that.
Go
I'll
for
answer
it.
this one first, and then I'll
Yep.
talk something related to purpose, which is passion. So when we talk about the education side, I think I realized when I was at uni that I had a knack for teaching. So before then, I didn't really teach anyone anything. I was a student, went to school, I got good grades. I was good at these types of subjects, not so good at those types of subjects. I kind of knew my strengths and my weaknesses. Went into engineering because I was good at math, and my guidance counselor was like, well, don't be a mathematician. If you're good at math, there's not that many jobs in that. There's more jobs in engineering, and you get to use math to build things in the real world. And that's kind of the boilerplate answer. She didn't know a lot about engineering either, but that's kind of what she told everyone that was good at math. And I
Yes.
sort of, listened to that, went, all
Be an
right,
engineer.
sounds good. And then spoke to my parents about like what type of engineer is the best engineer. And they said, if you do civil engineering, you're doing like bridges and buildings and railways and roads and stuff like that. Stuff that you kind of need to be there in person to create. So it's not like an IT job that can be sent overseas. So it's kind of like Australia's got a pretty high manpower rate. So anything that can be taken offshore will be taken offshore. So pick the engineering that they can't take offshore is kind of like the way they were trying to future proof my career choice.
Interesting.
And
Interesting
so
choice.
that's
Yeah.
kind of how I ended up doing civil engineering of all the other engineering options that I had. Now, what got me into education was, like I said, as I was doing my civil engineering degree, I realized like I'm picking up all this content from the lectures, and then during the tutorials, I am teaching essentially my colleagues or classmates this content that I just learned
Yeah.
just like a few hours ago or a day before. And so my retention skills were pretty good, and then my ability to just convey that information in a simple way that they could understand was also there. And I was like a natural at it. I didn't do like a teaching degree or anything like that. So when I realized that I could do that, and also that I really enjoyed it, I was just doing it for free. I wasn't charging them anything. I was like, okay, that's interesting. Take note of that. But then I went into engineering, and I found the first couple of years as a graduate very dissatisfying. And
Mm.
so that's when I started exploring, like, I don't really want to do this for the rest of my career. What else can I do? So that's what made me first jump out into education. And it's also the reason why I sort of dabble in education, even though I ended up going back
Yeah.
to engineering, because it is a part of me that adds value to people. So people
Yeah.
ticks that box. And it's also something that I have quite a passion for. And so relating the passion to purpose thing that I mentioned before, I think there's a lot of work that can be done in the world that serves some sort of purpose. But to pick something that is uniquely your purpose, you got to have some passion for that, right? So,
Yeah.
there's purpose in being a garbage collector. There's purpose in being a uh, janitor. There's purpose in all sorts of things, but like, what is the thing that makes you come alive and it adds value to the world? I
Yeah.
think
True.
that's kind of your unique purpose, right? And so I think for me, the teaching thing so effortless, like I could
Yep.
sort of do it for free for all those years for just the pure enjoyment of it, and clearly it adds value. It's something that's needed. So that's kind of how I define purpose. And for people listening at home, they go, okay, that's easy for you to say, Marty. It seems like you kind of had this clear
Yep.
purpose and passion thing. A trick that I kind of learnt by listening to, I think, Tim Ferriss back in the day was he said, if you don't really know what your purpose is or what your passion is, think back to what you wanted to do when you were 15. So 15 is a really important age because 15, you're not
Interesting.
really a kid anymore. So you don't have like those kid aspirations like I want to be a astronaut or I want to be a actor or actress or like like whatever those very common sort of childhood
Yep. Yep.
aspirations are. But at 15, you kind of know yourself and what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you're interested in school, what you're not interested in, that sort of thing. But you don't have the burdens of like the finances and paying rent and all like
Yeah.
that real world stuff,
True.
keeping
True.
up with the Joneses, the status, like, oh,
Yep.
this job is more prestigious than that job. And you just naturally come to some conclusion like, oh, I want to do this. So if you have a good memory, remember back to when you were 15. What did you want to do? And in that, you might have the nuggets for what your passion is. Now, the teaching side had not come into play for me at that point.
Interesting.
But the
Yeah.
things that I liked at the time, like I mentioned, was math. Like math was like my favorite subject at that point, and music
Yeah.
as well. So those were the two things that like I really liked to do at that point in time. And fast forward another 15, 16 years, and I find myself gravitating towards a task that require the most amount of math. And then, as I mentioned, I'm doing music on the side as well. So yeah, if you try to align with your 15-year-old self, you're kind of trying to align with the truest, most idealistic version of yourself.
Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting. Like I I'm I'm currently trying to look up a book, right?
Mm.
That I think could be really, really useful to people. I just keep forgetting the name of it. I think I'll just have to we'll just have to link it in the show notes later.
Yeah.
But essentially it was about um profit to purpose or purpose to profit, something like that. But
Okay.
essentially aligning what you really enjoy doing, and what your purpose is in the world to making money,
Mm.
right? And kind of goes to the concept of like ikigai, which is this Japanese concept of aligning what you enjoy, what the world needs, what you do for work, and something else. There was four circles, basically a Venn diagram, and then the center is like the sweet spot.
Mm.
But I wanted to ask you actually, why did you, like you said something along the lines of the first couple of years you were like, oh, I don't want to do this forever. I don't think it's my thing. Why did you feel that way? I feel like,
Yeah.
especially in this current day and age,
Yeah.
I felt like that when I was in finance, but obviously because finance wasn't really my thing. Like I'm in healthcare, I'm so much happier, different story. But
Yes.
I feel like the average graduate, right, is like, I want to come in. I heard this story from my training partner's mum.
Mm.
And my training partner is a healthcare professional. And he got his first ever job this year. Like he graduated last year, got his job this year. And his mum was like saying to someone else, do you know what his starting salary is? It was like 60, 70K or something along those lines, which is like very, very good.
Mm.
I did not start with that. I
Okay.
started with a lot less than that.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And his mom was like, that's so little. How does anyone survive with that? Like he should be getting 100K a year at least. Like first grad role, like mate. And I think that's the common thought of most graduates these days. Like,
Mm.
oh, and to be fair, it was my thought as well, right? I'm not
Interesting.
gonna take a job that pays me below 100K because I'm so good. And even though I've like got 5 seconds of work experience, right? Like,
Yeah. Gotcha.
so
Yeah.
why did you say that?
Interesting. So the finance thing, I think, was like a secondary
Okay.
dissatisfaction that came
Yep.
from the dissatisfaction of the work that I was doing. So as an engineering student, you learn how to design buildings and design bridges and, things that people look at and go like, wow.
Wow.
And
Yeah, yeah.
the thing is, you don't really design them like they design them in the real world at uni. You kind of design it in a very simplified manner with like a lot of the real world complications removed so that you kind of learn the core concept of the physics
Yep.
behind it, sort of thing. But you don't really know that until you work in the real world, how much more paperwork and how much more onerous and how many more safety meetings you have to go to and all this type of stuff to design anything, right? Forget a building or a bridge or something big, like just a small like stump in the ground. It's like there's a lot of steps involved. So I'm going in there, my first job, and I wanted to get into building structures, but I ended up in railways. There's just more work in that area. So
Yep.
I'm there thinking, okay, well, maybe I get to do like a track alignment that takes us from some suburb into the city or something. And that's like a massive job. That's what I'm working on at the moment with a big project that I'm working on that I can't really talk about for confidential reasons, but it's like a really big project that's like an alignment that goes from like one area to another.
Yeah.
And there's hundreds of people employed to do this work. It's not just me
Just
designing
one
and
project.
yeah, just
And it's a track alignment.
it's a track alignment, but there's everything else, the stations at every,
Oh,
so
okay.
many
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
kilometers, the overhead wiring, the infrastructure structures, the drainage, everything around it, right? So it's a very, very,
Yes.
very big project that goes
Yeah.
for years and years and years, and there's hundreds of people working on it, all with their specific role. But I'm sort of coming into it, okay, railways, I'm kind of expecting I'm going to work on that type of project where I get to decide because I'm the engineer. All right, we're going to start here and we're going to end there, and we're going to go down this windy path, and we're going to avoid these heritage sites, and we're going to try to go underground in this area and go above the ground in that area. And like I thought I'd be like making all the decisions because that's what you do in the uni project that you work on, where like you work in a team of
Yep.
4 people, and
True.
you're kind of making a quarter of the decision making. But as a graduate, you get no say whatsoever. You just get told, okay, do this like menial task that nobody wants to do, that like could have been automated if we had people that were good at automating, but we don't. So it's a manual task even in this day and age, and so you have to do that. So I'm doing this thing going like, I could have done this when I was in like year 10. How am I doing this now after all this education? And so I felt like I was being underutilized. And now looking back at it now, it's like, yeah, I was at the bottom of the pecking order. So of course I'm going to be given the least desirable task. When you start your first day in any job, you're the least experienced person in that organization. And so you start at the bottom. Doesn't matter what degree you got or how high your grades were. So that was a really bitter pill to swallow, and I struggled to swallow it, I think, more than some of my classmates that graduated, because part of it comes down to like where you graduated in the class, right? Like I was mentioning before, I was like the guy teaching the other people, and so I kind of had a bit of an ego coming into it, whereas some of the other people that graduated, they might have just been like, oh, thank God I got this like menial task, now I can kind of hide in the shadows, and my insecurities about my design skills are not really being tested because I'm doing something so simple. So they might have been grateful for that type of work. I was like, how dare you give this to me? I deserve much better than this type of thing. So that's where the dissatisfaction came. And then it grew into other things like, oh yeah, and plus you're only paying me this much. And you start comparing yourself to people from other graduate roles in other companies, and they might be making like 10 grand more than you, like not even that much more. But if you're sitting there with 60 grand and they're sitting there with 70 grand, you think like they're making so much more than you are. Like, how do they already get to 70 grand? Like, so it was kind of like that comparison, the dissatisfaction by the comparison. So like all those reasons, and also the fact that I was working eventually in a project that was like really tight on budget. And so I kind of got squeezed a little bit. Like I was trying to do a task. It took me 8 hours, and someone made a comment that, oh, you should have done it in 6 hours or something like that. And it was like the last, the straw that broke the camel's back. And I was like, nah, I'm getting out of here. I'm not going to get micromanaged like this. And so, yeah, it was, 2 years of like frustration hit like boiling point type of thing. And like, thankfully, when I left that job, I didn't like burn bridges and say like, to hell with you guys or anything like that. Everyone that was around me could like sense the frustration, but I think I was professional enough to kind of go, yeah, look, I'm moving on. I'm trying to find other things. And what surprised me was at the end, I actually got a lot of positive feedback of like the work that I did, the work that I begrudgingly did, that I cursed underneath my breath. They were like, oh, you did a really good job at that. And so, I was like, okay, at least I kind of left on a positive note. But I did not think I would be coming back. I thought, yep, that's it. That was a mistake. Never going back there, going into education, and loved education. But the reason I came back to engineering was not for the purest reasons. It was more for like financial stability reasons, because I went from full-time job in engineering into casual work in education. And as much as I loved the education part, casual work and trying to get into the property market don't always go hand in hand, which I kind of found out in the hard way when I went to the bank to like apply for my first sort of pre-approval. So that's kind of what got me back into engineering. But thankfully, there's a happy
Yeah.
ending to this story. When I came back to engineering, it was like a totally different experience. And it turns out I just gotten kind of unlucky that I graduated at the time that I graduated with the types of projects that were out that weren't very engaging, that were really low in budget. So I got micromanaged and stuff like that. When I came back a second time round, I got put straight into some more interesting work that were more intellectually engaging, and the budgets were a lot healthier. So I got paid a lot more, was doing more rewarding work, and yeah, it's just
Yeah.
sometimes the economic cycle can be a bit harsh if you sort of enter into the economy like during a recession, which is what it was like a
Yeah.
mini recession during that time when I joined.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting. Like I think at the end of the day, right? Like if you have a purpose that you believe in, that you stand by, that you stick to, I think eventually, I mean, unless it's something crazy, right, or fanatical, but otherwise, I think at the end of the day, it, generally speaking, seems to work out for most people
yeah, I would agree with
over
that.
the long run. Over the
Yeah.
long run, I have learnt last year to think in years, not in days or months.
Mm. Yeah, very
Uh,
wise. Yeah.
That's kind of how like things will average out.
Mm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it keeps you on one path, right? Rather than always
Yeah.
jumping back to the start and then starting a new thing. And yeah, it's interesting. Like there's so many different phrases and advice that we get as people when it comes to our career, and some like contradicts others, and sometimes you
Yeah.
can just use a phrase to like do what you always wanted to do anyways and just use that as a
Yeah, yeah,
reaffirming
true.
thing. Like I hear this thing sometimes where it's like your 20s is your time to like try everything, and then your
Mm.
30s is your time to like focus in on the thing that you're good at and really excel at that. And I think some people can take that a little bit too literally. Like if you kind of found what you're good at like 25, like just go for it. Like don't go, "Oh, I got 5 more years to like sample all these different things." Like what value does that add if you kind of found what you love and what you're good at?
Yeah.
Just start building. That's kind of what I would say. But yeah, I think
Yes and no. Yes
yeah.
and
Okay,
no.
go on. Yeah,
I actually,
what do you think?
so like, I think I come from the perspective of like, I started work late. So I started at like 24, maybe, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. So
You think that's late?
yeah,
Okay, interesting.
like
Compared
I
to
started full-time work
yeah,
at
okay.
24.
That's not that late, man. Like a lot of people that do master's degrees and stuff, like 25 is probably the
Oh,
standard.
like I only have a bachelor.
Yeah, gotcha. That's
Yeah.
why you
So
think you
like
start
me
late.
having
Yeah.
a bachelor, like it's not like I came out with a PhD, which is like totally different. If you
Yeah.
have a PhD, like really, really good,
Mm,
or you have a master's, that's a different story. But I've only got a bachelor's because I went into uni a little bit later.
gotcha. Yeah.
And I feel like that saying is more so from the perspective of like, if you've already found something, stay in it. But outside of whatever you're doing, spend some time exploring other things because you never know, that could be an additional thing to this.
Yes.
Or
I
like,
would agree with that. Yeah.
you might be so much better at that other thing that you would like pivot, right? Or
Yep.
like, I don't know. But that's kind of the perspective I come from because like some of my experiences in life have not necessarily matched 100% to what I'm doing now, but it has helped me with a lot of the work that I'm doing. So like,
Interesting.
because I'm in aged care, nutrition plays a big part. I bodybuild for a good couple of years. And like, obviously nutrition's a massive part of what I do. And
Mm,
therefore I needed to know my macros. I need to know how to count everything. I needed to know what a typical serve of protein looks like. I needed to know all of that. And although I don't know like the academic side of it that very well, like what the paper, the literature says, but because of my experience in bodybuilding, I know what it should look like. Like what
absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
basically the same kind of portion, same size that I have. Sorry, same proportions that I have, just much smaller portions for people like the elderly. That's the kind of one of the projects I'm looking at, right? They wanted
Yeah.
to kind of figure out how to do all this stuff on a mass scale. But yeah, like I think sometimes dabbling can help. Sometimes touching different industries, different activities, hobbies and stuff can really help what you're doing full time or whatever your purpose is full time, even if you've already found it.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that because even in my life, if I think back, there's so many examples of things I've kind of like dabbled in randomly that I thought like, okay, that was kind of a failed venture. When am I ever
Mm,
going to use that again? And then fast forward a few years, and I'm using that skill to really differentiate myself from everybody else who hasn't
exactly.
explored in that area. So
Exactly.
recently, I developed a online course, and this is a great example of the whole dabbling in education thing, then coming back to engineering.
Yeah.
That's not a common thing that people do, by the way. Like, you know, when they get into engineering, they might like jump from design to construction or, you know, design to government or something like that. But to just jump industries and just go into education. And I taught, when I say education, just to clarify for people, like, there's a lot of random jobs, like casual jobs. I was lecturing at a uni. I was a maths advisor at another uni. I was a
Wow.
drum teacher at a primary school. I taught drums at like a local music school, and then I started my own drum teaching business, like out of home. I might have done a few other things as well, but there's just like a whole mishmash of like anything I could kind of get my hands on to fill up
Yeah.
my schedule that was education related. So in doing all of that, I ended up developing a bunch of skills. And one of those was I developed an online course for Udemy, which is like Skillshare, you know,
Yeah.
that sort of platform, and developed that and used it in my job interviews in education to say like, look, I don't have like a masters of teaching or master of education like some of the other people that are applying for this job, but I've created an online course in a time when a lot of educational content is going online. So I clearly know how to do this, the technology, recording myself, being comfortable in front of camera, explaining concepts, blah, blah, blah. And it worked. Like I end up getting these casual positions that
Yeah.
generally you would need this masters of education or masters of teaching to get. So that really helped for that reason. But I was actually creating that online course so that I could make a lot of money from the online course. I thought like, yeah, I'm gonna create an online course. It's gonna go viral. Everyone's gonna pay, you know, $20 each, and I'm gonna be like a millionaire by the end of the year type of thing. And you know, I probably made like 200, $300 from that online course, and it cost me like, you know, $1,000 to produce or something, not including my time, just the equipment that I had to buy to like make it all work. So overall, I made a loss on that if you look at it financially. But that skill that I learned last year or the year before that, I ended up creating an online course for the engineering work that I do, which then gets used in my company. And I got asked to speak at a conference about the idea of using online content to knowledge transfer to graduate engineers because I'm in a senior position now. So like looking back on it, like if I hadn't developed that skill, that 1 year of, you know, wandering and doing different things, I wouldn't
Yeah.
be in that position to know that, yeah, I have the capability of creating a course. I'm not just going to like record a video or just screen record myself on Teams as I talk about something, which is what the typical engineer would do. But I'm actually going to create an online course that has this like through line and has this logical structure and teaches people from the very beginning to a point where they can design for themselves. So, yeah, short story long, I think I agree with your point. We gotta dabble in different things that we're interested in,
Yeah.
and we can find ways to integrate it into our work, and in the end, become indispensable. Right? So you become like a unicorn
Agreed.
in your field if you can do that sort of portion size thing that you described for the elderly.
Mm,
The person next to you that doesn't have the bodybuilding background probably doesn't know anything about that. So, you know, it's always going to be handy to like find those
yeah.
two areas of interest and expertise and like try and align them to make them
Yeah.
uniquely your own.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, like my purpose has always been to be in the healthcare space. I think when I was a lot younger, I remember when I was in like year 9, I made an announcement I'm gonna be a doctor. And then at like a family dinner with another family.
Yeah.
And then the next and like we know them, the kids went to our school and the next day the daughter comes up to me, man, like you should have said that because like now my parents are asking me why am I not wanting to be a doctor? I was like, whoops. Well, I quickly changed
Yeah.
after discovering how difficult it is, one, and two, that people ask me like why like I'm in healthcare, but why am I not like a physio or chiro or nurse, doctor, etc. One, because it's difficult, but two, I don't like to touch people that much.
Okay.
And all those jobs are very hands-on,
Yeah. That's
right?
it.
You have to palpate things, you have to like inspect, like all of that. And I just didn't want to touch people.
Yep.
So
And it's
pretty
good,
much,
good you realize that early, right? I'm sure you know people who like do an entire degree and
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
it only
yeah.
dawns on them on like their placement or whatever. It's like I don't actually like the physical aspect of this job or whatever. It's like
Yeah.
you didn't have that level of introspection when you got into this
I
like
mean,
massive,
like
so it's
the
yeah.
tough thing sometimes, right, is like like uni courses oversell you on
Mm,
what you can do eventually. Like I
right.
remember going to my course and like the person who I was talking to on the open day was like, "Oh my gosh, this course is amazing. This course, there's so much potential and you can make so much money. One of our grads made 80 grand and literally she's the only one out of like everyone.
Yeah.
That and also like, yes, she wasn't lying. There are a lot of opportunities, but she also didn't mention, she failed to mention that those opportunities are in this like very, 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 very specific niche little area which only attracts like a certain kind of person. And you have to have that kind of like personality to do it.
Yep.
Like sit in front of your computer quietly and kind of just do the work. And like that's what the work requires, like a
Right.
lot of focus, a lot of concentration.
Yeah.
And like you look at me, I have none of that. I can't do any of that. I
Yeah.
sit down. I remember going on placement 5 minutes and I'm like, man, this sucks.
Dude.
I was like, but you know what? I'm gonna take this degree. I'm gonna take the experience. And there was one little like niche topic that we learned about, right?
Mm,
Electronic health records.
yep.
It was literally one topic, not even one topic. It was one small little like we spent 3 weeks on it out of the whole 3 years.
Yeah. Okay.
I decided there and then that 3 weeks was going to be my specialty.
Right. And it has
So
been. So you
yeah, and
actually
it
made
has
it
been. Yeah,
happen.
yeah.
Yeah.
So like that's my background.
Yeah.
I worked in the GP space doing that. I worked in a hospital space doing that. Now I work in aged care with the same expertise that I have,
Mm.
and I'm like studying that same thing as well. So I was like that 3 weeks just became my entire like career. Um, and like my purpose has really been like, okay, how can I make a difference in the aged care system without like touching people? That was me. I wanted to make a difference without being a doctor. And I felt like one of the best ways to do it is through like, this is marrying the whole like interest in entrepreneurship. Like love to read a lot of entrepreneurship stuff and listen to a lot of entrepreneurs and whatnot. Like people always talk about this whole notion of like leverage. What's the best thing you can do to like leverage this and leverage that, right?
Mm.
So I was like, oh, I'll be in healthcare. I'll be in the tech space. I'll leverage tech to make a difference in healthcare, which kind of made more sense to me
Yep.
rather than being a doctor helping one-on-one or a nurse or a chiro or a physio. I can just leverage tech.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to segue out of purpose into profits, I think leverage is a great thing to segue because for people that are not familiar with the term leverage and why that gets used in these sorts of contexts, generally speaking, if you can leverage something, you can get more out of that one effort. There's like this multiplier
Yeah,
effect, right?
bigger
So
return.
yeah, so like an example, in let's say education, you can do like one-on-one tutoring, and for every hour of your time, you're adding value to that one student that's there in front of you, and you can charge them a certain hourly rate,
Yep.
and you're competing with other people that are also doing the same thing, and so your hourly rate is kind of dictated by the market price. And if you're like really good, you can charge a little bit more, but if you charge way too much, no one's going to come to you, everyone's going to go to the other person. So that's kind of a non-leverage solution. And then building like an online course, and then selling that for, let's say, a fraction of the price, but then getting a lot of enrollments into that, and that essentially being like a passive income, coming out of that is a way of leveraging that knowledge that you have, to many different people, and then getting a much bigger return on your time and effort. So I guess if the goal is to make the most amount of money, leverage is always got to be sort of front of mind for a lot of entrepreneurs, and that's why it comes out so often. But I guess as we're talking, for the two of us, neither of us are really entrepreneurs. We are people that work full time for organizations. You're in the nonprofit space. I'm in private consulting space, but we do have like dabbles in different things that could be monetized, could be leveraged. Maybe we didn't quite get to the point where it's leveraged. Maybe we got to the point where it's monetized. When it comes to like the drum lessons, for example, I got to the point where I was running a very efficient business, but it was not leveraged. And I say efficiency in terms of I developed content that I could apply to every student. So it wasn't like curated for each student that I had. I had this like set curriculum that I created, and every student would go through that. So the effort that it took to create the content was a one-time effort, but every student that I got through that funnel, I didn't have to recreate the content, didn't have to reinvent the wheel. So basically that investment into the business was like a one-time effort that I didn't get paid for, but then for every student that came through it, I would get paid for it. And so as long as the hourly rate was kind of worth that initial investment, it would kind of pay for itself and then pay dividends beyond that point. But it was never leveraged because it was always a one-on-one thing, and I could never quite make it online. It just didn't satisfy my ethics, basically, because something like music requires a lot of student to teacher feedback. So just having like an online course where it's like, here's all the content, now go away and do as the video says, doesn't work, especially with kids. And even with adults, people get into bad habits and there's no one there to kind of correct you as you progress on your journey. So I couldn't do it as much as I wanted to because I had the skills to create like the online course as well as the skills to teach the drums. Always wanted to do it, but just realized that I'd be creating a product that didn't quite add value. So it comes down to the people side of things. The profits, I guess, it took a hit, but look, I'm not complaining. It was a good venture. I did it for years. I barely do it anymore now, busy with other things. But coming to the profit side, I want to talk to you about this whole financial thing that you mentioned. The mum saying the thing about the 100 grand versus the 60 grand. And then, you also are saying that you made less than 60 grand when you first started. Profits is an interesting thing to talk about on this podcast because money is always considered like a really taboo thing. Like you're not supposed to talk about it, and et cetera, et cetera. But look, we've talked about various things that are considered taboo and like personal. Like we talked about regrets in the last episode, which like a lot of people will be like, oh, I never admit your regrets and stuff like that. So we've already gone down that path. Let's talk about the money side and how that kind of relates to happiness, fulfillment, all that type of stuff that we care about as human beings. When I started, I was making 60 grand a year. So I guess by your standards, that's like balling as a graduate, right?
Yeah, dude.
I guess I kind of looked around at engineering graduates, and I think the range was maybe around 55 grand to like 75 grand. So at 60 grand, I was kind of like, it's, a little bit below average. And so like a few $1,000 like made a difference to me back then. Now I realize like that's putting way too much emphasis on the money side and not on the do you enjoy what you like doing? And engineering is one of those things where it's actually very good growth potential financially. As a
Yeah.
graduate, I mean, 60 grand doesn't sound that impressive, but then as you progress through, and especially
Yeah.
if you do what I did, which was find a niche and get good at that niche, then you can progress through financially. And even though I said we talk about salary, I won't mention how much I make at this point in time. But yeah, it's considerably more than the 60 grand.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of glad I didn't you know, discount engineering based on salary, because I realize compared to some other professions like teaching, for example, where you just have like this um, salary that's dictated by the government, regardless of what you do. Maybe if you work in private schools, it's a bit different, but like government schools, these figures might be very outdated now. But when I was looking into education, I looked into it and it was like, yeah, the starting salary for engineer and teacher is about the same, but like 10 years into teaching, you'll go from like 60 grand starting to like 100 grand, and you will be at 100 grand. And then if you want to make more than that, you got to be like 10 years plus experience as a teacher, plus you're also like a year level coordinator, plus you're also like you got to pick all these additional responsibilities to like bump up your salary just a little bit more. And so looking at where I am now as like an engineer, it's like, oh wow,
Mm.
like the ceiling is way higher as an engineer compared to like a school teacher, for example. So there are differences in how much you can make depending on the profession that you pick.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like the importance you put on the salary side of things, how you think about money, because everyone thinks about money differently. So it'd be interesting to hear your
Yeah.
your personal take.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think as a grad, the reason why so many grads put such a heavy emphasis on money is because, well, you're a grad, so you haven't been making a lot of money, even if you've been working. Like I worked part-time,
Yeah.
but 300 a week, if that, that's very little money.
Mm.
So as a grad to be making, I think like I think it works out to be maybe like 1,000, or like after taxes maybe like 800-900 a week is decent. Like it's a lot better, but like you want to be making six figures, right? Like that's where it's at.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah.
I think like as a grad, right?
Yeah.
That's the mentality that I came out of uni with, and I made less than you. I made 57,500. I
Okay.
was super salty about that, real salty, because I was
Yeah.
like, man, 57,500, that's so little.
Mm.
But oh man, gotta take what you can get. Um, and I guess with what I'm doing and with my purpose, I am I've placed a lot less emphasis on how much I earn in my full-time job, although that is not always the smartest move necessarily from a financial perspective,
Mm.
because that's where the bulk of your time goes into. But I guess the way I see it right now, especially with the job that I'm doing, like one, it's meaningful. Two, the people, like speaking about the people part, the people I'm surrounded by are amazing. Very, very like good people, first of all. And then second of all, very, very high caliber individuals.
Right.
All of them, at my workplace, a PhD means nothing, because basically three-quarters of them have a PhD, plus a whole bunch of other awards and all these crazy things that they've done, right?
Mm.
So like qualifications doesn't mean much of anything where I am at. Experience, well, everyone's done a lot of everything. So like I think that's now I'm at a point in life where I've placed a lot more emphasis on um, the purpose that I'm trying to live out and the difference that I'm trying to make. And then outside of work, it's like, okay, cool. That's where the money thing comes in. And I'm trying to like invest in property and trying to look into like angel investing and look into venture capital for next time, 10 years down the line or something. And doing all this other stuff, other extracurricular activity, like being a student ambassador and whatnot as well for uni, to get a little bit of extra cash. Although I know that it's not the most efficient way of doing it, I would rather my last job, the job before I had this one right now, I made more money there.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you took
But
a pay cut for the
yeah,
purpose.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I knew how miserable I was there, and the miserableness versus the slight pay cut, like it was fine. It was a trade-off I had to make for
Yeah.
now anyways. So
Yeah.
until I
Interesting.
get more experience, then I can like dictate what I want. But for now, I think it was a worthy trade-off for now.
Gotcha. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think this is an interesting thing. If I summarize like what you just said in my own words, I would say like you optimized for fulfillment. You didn't optimize for money in that decision, right? So you could have
Yeah.
been making more money had you just stayed at the role that you were in, but you would have been a lot more miserable. And so, why do we make money? It's like, does it fulfill that need that we have? At the end
Yeah.
of the day, like money pays for the food, the roof over your head, the utilities, all that type of stuff. And then beyond that point, I mean, what is it really doing for you, right? So you might think about it like, yeah, you need to put some
Yeah.
aside for like a rainy day. You need to put some aside for your investments into the future or something. But if you're like hating your day to day life right now, and you're just doing it like for the money, is that really the best way to live your life?
Yeah.
Because tomorrow isn't promised to any of us, and if you're the type of person that,
Yeah.
even if you're lucky enough to live a full life, do you really want to be miserable all the way till you're like 60 or 65 something, and
Yeah.
then
I think,
retire to enjoy the golden years? It doesn't really make that much sense. I know
yeah.
that's like the philosophy that a lot of previous generations would espouse, but yeah, I think for a lot of us that doesn't quite make sense. We want to find purpose in the work that we do now, and
Yeah.
if it means taking a pay cut, we kind of look at it like, does it still like give us enough money for us to meet the basics? And if it
Mm.
does, then that's not off the table to take that pay
I,
cut. Now, I can't say I've done that recently. I did that when I went into education from engineering like
yeah.
a while back. I took the pay cut and the stable pay. So yeah, I haven't done that in recent times, but I can definitely relate to you. Like when I made that decision back in the day, it
Yeah.
was definitely happiness, fulfillment driven as opposed to financially driven.
Yeah, I mean, like the way I look at it now, right? It's like, oh, by the way, on top of that, in my last workplace, I didn't like anyone, and vice versa. People didn't like me. It
Yeah.
was a pretty simple trade-off.
Yeah.
Um,
Hopefully, none of them are listening to this podcast. So-
it's okay. It's okay. They can listen to it. It's
okay.
okay. It's fine. I'm confident enough in myself. It's all good.
Gotcha. They're
Um,
sitting there with like
it's
tears rolling down their cheeks. They're just like, oh
no,
no.
it's not that I disliked everyone. I just like there were a few people that were really, really challenging,
Yeah.
but by and large, everyone was pretty good. Um, I wouldn't say they were like friends or anything though. Not compared to where I'm at right now.
Right.
Man, so much better.
Yeah.
I can just like talk crap with my boss. I can talk crap with any of my colleagues, and it's all good. And then like, we'll work when we need to work, but otherwise, man, we can do whatever we can say whatever we want. And I like that so much more as
Gotcha.
compared to my previous place. But anyways,
Interesting.
what I was gonna say is
Hmm.
like, I think now it's like purpose over everything else, if possible, right? I know people are in different circumstances, all that sort of stuff. And sometimes circumstances dictate what you can and can't do. But if you can, I feel like purpose above all else, because from what I've seen and from what I've heard, a lot of people that I would, in my personal opinion, determine as successful have led their life through purpose, and they have done very well in life. Now, whether that's from a financial perspective, whether that's from a relation perspective, same,
Mm.
they've done financially, some of them haven't, become like billionaires or anything like that. Some have done quite well, multi millionaires. Some have just had a very average income.
Yeah.
But what I am very somewhat envious of, or what I really look up to, is the fact that they have led their lives with purpose, and they've got great relationships around them. They've got great people around them that stand by very similar things, that live by the same principles as they do. And like that's something that I've always wanted in my life. And that's kind of why, like, coming back to the people side of things, like why I gravitated towards you as well.
Mm,
Because like 2022, I made it the year like, oh, I actually need friends.
mm.
Because previous to that, I didn't really have any.
Right.
Like full disclosure, I
Yeah.
didn't really have a lot of friends. I had one very, very good friend, and then that was kind of it. So I wanted to like expand my circle a little bit more with people that um not necessarily agree with me, but we share the same values. We share the same principles. I think both of you, we share very similar values,
Yep.
very similar principles in life.
Yep.
We don't always agree on the path to get there.
Mm.
And that's why we can have this back and forth.
Yep.
But regardless, we're still friends.
Yeah.
And that's
Agreed, man. Yeah, the community side. I mean, we've talked about that in the episode 2, loneliness epidemic, and like how important that is,
yeah.
and how there's like health markers that will decline if you don't prioritize this thing as well. So yeah, definitely you can fall into the trap of like chasing the money at the cost of everything else. There's jobs out there that definitely would limit your social circles and things like that, but pay a lot of money. Like
Yeah.
if you work out in the mines, for example, and like I'm not saying that you can't make any friends if you work out in the mines. I've got some friends that do that, but like if you wanted to sign up for like a weekly activity at your local club, but
Yeah.
every 2 weeks
Yeah.
you're in another state, in the middle of nowhere type of thing, you can't be as consistent for that particular activity as someone who like works in the one place and so can form more relationships at that area and things like that. So there's always those types of trade-offs. They pay you a premium, but then you sacrifice these other things, or you sacrifice your health or your social connections, or
I
whatever it
mean,
is. So yeah, there
yeah.
is no such thing as a free lunch with a lot of these types of roles. So always look at that holistically is, I guess, our advice
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
people. The other thing that I would say is you had that thing about when you graduated, you're like 100 grand, six figures. That's like the place to be, right? And
Only six
and
figures.
like 60 grand or 57.5 grand is like nothing. That that you had that sort
Negligible.
of
So negligible.
you had that here's at this point. If I get to here, I'll be happy, sort of thing, right? For me, it was 80 grand. So I was at 60
Yeah.
grand. I was like, oh, if I get to 80 grand, I'll just be balling the gold chains and everything, driving the Maserati.
Man, you are.
So the reason 80 grand was there was I read some or listened to a podcast. I can't remember where I got this
Yeah.
information, but something about how if you make 80 grand a year, that's kind of where you have your bases covered. You know that you're going to be able to pay your gas, your electricity, your food, a basic
Yeah.
life is sorted. Now, I can't remember if this was like an Australian study or if it's an American study, but like whatever the case was, I think the conversion rate sort of converted out to like 80,000 Australian dollars. And the interesting thing is like that was the goal. Like, oh, if I get to 80, like how do I get to 80? That's what I want to get to. And now I've like far surpassed 80 grand. But when I think about my happiness level, like did it kind of go up as I went from like 80 to 90 to 90 to 100, 100 to 110 and things like that? And it's like, no, it's like other things start to preoccupy you, like your money thing is sorted, but then there's other things that like keep you up at night that you kind of become dissatisfied about. So human beings always have like this bias to what's wrong, so like what's missing in life, and you're
That's
always
true.
kind of
Yeah,
chasing
I
that.
agree
you're
with that.
you're, you're dissatisfied, so you kind of need to recognize that in yourself and go like, oh, if you're at double that, if you're 160 grand and you're like dissatisfied and you think when you get to 200 grand that's when you're going to be happy, it's like, nah, you don't really understand how the human brain works. It's like you will just reset. It's like hedonic adaptation. You will just reset
Yeah.
and then you'll find something else. So understanding that is like the, penny drop moment where you go, okay, that's just human tendency. My mind is sort of playing tricks on me here. Financially, I am sorted. I really need to focus on these other areas of life because that's where the real value add to my happiness resides, not in the chasing that extra 10% here or there.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, if you want to chase that, do it, but just know that if it's coming at a cost, find out exactly what that cost is.
True.
Yep.
True. Let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
So you said before everyone has some sort of bias, right? When it comes to all this sort of stuff, like
Yeah.
making money and all that. What's your bias right now?
Or like, what am I leaning towards in my life? Like,
Yeah,
what am I
what are you
trying to
leaning? What's
prioritize?
the thing, yeah, that you're trying to figure out, that you're trying to fix right now?
Oh man, that's a good question. Did not think this podcast would go down that road. But yeah, definitely happy to take it there. I think at the moment I'm working on my fitness and like body composition and things like that. Because, like a healthy body is a healthy mind. If you improve your body, you will improve your thought process as well. And like, I was at my heaviest ever at the end of the 2 years of lockdown. And like,
Yep.
I was quite like unhappy
Can I
and
ask what
emotional.
weight that was?
That was 83 kilos. So I was,
Bro,
yeah.
I'm 83 right now.
Oh, I mean, you're like 83 of pure muscle. That's not
You
what I
know,
was.
we went surfing yesterday, right?
Yeah,
So my two brothers and I went surfing,
yeah.
and like out of my siblings, I'm the shortest
Okay, yeah.
by so my oldest brother is I think 182,
Hmm.
if I'm not wrong, and then my younger brother is 184, I
Okay.
believe.
Yep.
Yeah, so like a whole 9 centimeters and however many other centimeters that is. Um, but I'm the heaviest by far.
Oh wow. Yeah, I've met your brothers. Yeah, they're like skinny,
Yeah,
tall, skinny dudes. So
yeah,
yeah, makes sense.
yeah. I'm heavier than the both of them by like 4 or 5 kilos
And how
at
does that make
least.
you feel?
The surfing instructor was like, "All right, so who's the heaviest?" And he was looking at both my other brothers, and they looked at me. They're like, "Him." I'm like, "Yeah, it's me."
Dude, like your form of heaviness is nothing to be worried about. I think for me it was like I was heavy and I went to get like my test done and
Yeah.
stuff like that, and I was like a little bit high on the cholesterol, like one of the four cholesterols and stuff like that.
Yep.
So I guess like a lot of people would look at that and go, ah, look, that's not a big deal. Like, don't stress out about it too
That's a
much.
very
But
big deal,
yeah,
man.
I look at it like, no. This is my health. It's like the most important
Yeah.
thing. So after I saw that, I started like, just being more active, not really looking at my diet too much, to be honest, just getting outside a lot more. And after
Yep.
2 years of lockdown, sedentary behavior, like just going outside and doing things ended up, the calorie expenditure was a lot more. So I ended up dropping a bunch of weight pretty quickly over that
Yeah.
summer and then sort of slowly
Nice.
started putting it back on very slowly. So didn't even realize that I'd like gained another like 4 kilos over the course of like 6 months. So very, very slowly, but coming into
Not
December
bad.
of last year, so like last month basically, sort of weighed myself and went, oh no, I'm kind of headed back in that direction that I was at before, despite the fact that
Yeah.
I'm very active. I'm just eating like whatever I want to eat and not really tracking anything. So yeah, now like completely changed in terms of what I'm eating, and my standards for what I put in my mouth is completely different. So seeing some very quick results, heading back down into the right region,
Nice.
and yeah, trying to get into
Yeah.
the best shape of my life. So currently making the best money of my life. So I could go higher in that area as well, but it's like we talked about before, is no point optimizing that if it's coming at the cost of other things. So right
True.
now, still doing the job, still being diligent, playing in the band, enjoying life and doing all that, but yeah, trying to put the focus on health and nutrition. So I think, yeah, that's where my bias lies at this point in time.
Nice. Nice.
How about you?
Very
What's
cool.
what's your bias at this point in time? Where you focusing your energy and attention?
My energy and attention right now is on uni. Just, I think, okay, so I have a tendency to have all these like wild, fancy, very optimistic ideas, right? And I've been like that as a kid.
Hmm.
Just like, oh man, I should do this. And without thinking of what it actually takes, how difficult it is, how expensive it is, I'm like, yeah, I should just do it. And then I go do it. So like I've always been very action oriented,
Yeah.
perhaps a little bit too action oriented with like zero thinking behind it.
Okay.
So just like, yes, let's go do it. Doesn't matter what it takes.
Yeah.
Just go do it. And then after I'm like, oh, it's actually really difficult. Or like, oh, it's actually really expensive. Oh, it's actually not practical. Then I start it and kind of stop halfway. And that's like one of the things that I've been looking to stop doing.
Stop doing random things. That's your
Stop stop doing random things without thinking about it.
Okay.
Like I don't think doing random things is the problem. It's more so like I do it, then I don't do it, and there's no real like purpose to it.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to you know how people say like never finish something you started. Never end something you started. Never
Always finish what you started. Is that what you?
Yeah, always finish what you started.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah.
Sorry. Always finish what you started.
Yeah.
Right? But like there are some things that you just don't enjoy, that you just don't want to do, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that I've been trying to do is less of pick up, put down, and more so of, oh, I'm going to pick up and I'm going to commit to this for a week, a month, a year. And then based on that, make my decision whether I should continue or not. So it's a little bit more purposeful.
Yeah.
Without just like random.
Yep.
Like last time I used to just like pick up guitar for 5 seconds and be like, nah, it's too hard. I picked up drums actually. I don't know if I told you.
Yeah,
this,
you mentioned that in one of the podcasts.
For like 2 terms.
Yeah.
And then I was like, nah, Seebs.
Yeah.
And I should have just like, oh, okay, like I'll do it for a term and then reassess there instead of like wasting the time and all that sort of stuff. But that's the thing that I've been trying to focus on right now. So like I made the decision of doing a master's by research, not by coursework. And it turned out to be just the most difficult thing I've encountered so far.
Yep. But you're sticking with it as per your
and I'm sticking with it.
new ways, right?
I told my supervisors today, I was just like, oh man, I picked this stupid thing up. Now I can't stop. Oh my gosh. It's turning out to be a nightmare. But I think the good thing for me is when I finish this, I'll look back and be like, oh man, I finished something significant. I picked up something and I finished something significant. And I think I feel like, so you spoke about this the last time, right? You're someone that like, if you pick it up, you'll just do it.
Yeah.
And you'll make sure you do well and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I was never like that. And I think there's a lot of people that are not like that as well, not like you as well.
Yes, true.
And a lot of people just pick up things randomly and drop things randomly. And I'm of that kind. So that's one of the things that I've been trying to stop doing. So uni's one. The other thing that I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to learn the reason why I'm reading this visual thinking book is because I want to understand how people think, like the non-logical thinkers think. I think I have a better understanding, albeit I can still get better at it, of how logical thinkers think and like their thought process. It's very like stepped out, laid out.
Yeah.
And I think I fall more into that camp than I do visual thinking. And visual thinking is like people who think in pictures.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. So
like their head's a movie.
Yeah, absolutely. So your bias on finishing what you started applies to the master's degree. And what else is like finishing the book that you're reading at the moment? That's
same.
Also
finishing the book.
I
started a book a week ago.
Is there anything else that you're trying to finish what you started along that vein that the old you might have just given up?
Weightlifting.
Oh, okay. Yeah, got you.
Weightlifting.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think like going to gym's fun
yeah,
for me, that
yeah,
is. And like I can go there and do whatever the heck I want.
yeah.
But I think with weightlifting, I said this to a friend. I was like, man, I just want to know if I'm good enough to go to world championships, to qualify for world champs. Like I don't even need to make it. I just need to know if I'm good enough.
Yeah.
And the only way you know if you're good enough is if you put in some time and effort over the next 5 years or so
Yeah.
to see if you have the makings of it. And
You
that's it.
you got to put in the time. Yeah, absolutely, man.
Like you have to put in some effort in order to be like, oh, okay, you actually look genetically gifted, you actually got the technique right, you actually, this and that.
Man,
So unfortunately, that's that.
I love this topic, even though it's not part of the people, uh, uh, profits and purpose sort of.
It is, right? It
Is
is
it?
part of your purpose.
It okay? It's maybe part of your
Like what
approach,
is
your
your,
personality.
yeah,
Yeah,
your
yeah,
approach,
yeah.
right, to your purpose.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Interesting. Yeah, okay. So it is part of that. But the thing that I love about this particular topic is, like you mentioned, most people are like who you used to be. Uh, I find that, anyways, like in my travels and people I speak to, this like idea of just doing the one thing and then getting really good at it and like not giving up on it until you've reached that um, top of the mountain, whatever you define that to be, before you go on to the next thing, is rare, and it always
It
confused
is.
me, like
Mm.
why people just give things up so readily. And it's not that I've never given anything up. I remember I did like taekwondo when I was like grade three or something. I did like two classes and then that was it. I never did it again. And there's a few things like that where you kind of try it, you go, okay, it's not really for me, and then you give it up. Like I'm not saying that's what I don't get. I totally understand that. But it's kind of like doing something, but then very half heartedly, and then giving it up
Yeah.
and then having nothing to show for it. It's like, well, what was the point of that? Is how I always look at it, right? So if I'm gonna pick up anything like a extracurricular thing, there's got to be like some objective for it. Like when I play tennis, for example, I don't really get any better at tennis because I don't like get coaching for it anymore. I did as a kid, but like not anymore. And I'm not like actively working on my technique and my strokes and stuff like that. I'm just trying to win the match. So I just go there, I'm competitive, I try to win the match. And at the end of the day, I do some good cardio, I have some fun. And like that is its purpose. It's not for me to get better at it. I know that in my
Yep.
mind. So I don't get disappointed with
It's a
myself.
hobby, right?
Yeah.
That's the purpose of it.
Yeah.
An outlet.
And
That's it.
I have very few of those. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna keep this one as like a non-serious thing before I,
Yeah.
start like getting coaching for it and taking it like seriously and sitting there with like 100 balls, practicing my serve every day and stuff like that. So I don't do that with that. But then with like other activities that I've done, and this is delving into the outside of work type of things that I do, like playing in the band. I take that pretty seriously. I chart out all the songs. I'm in a Green Day tribute band, so we play all these Green Day tunes. And instead of just like listening to the song and going, okay, yeah, kind of remember the way the song works, I'll chart it out like note for note. I'll try to learn it exactly like it is on the album. And then obviously when I'm on stage, there's some improvisation that goes on. When I rehearse with the band, we go like, maybe we can extend this section and stuff like that. But it's all like very professional to like a very high standard because we want to bring the best show that we possibly can.
Yeah, that's it.
One thing that my mates in dance class make fun of me for is I take notes. So like nobody takes notes in dance class, but like I'm like listening to the instructor, and then when I get back home, I'll write down like, okay, you do this move and you do that move, and they record a video of it. I like watch the video, I'll write it down because I realize I retain it better if I write the note, if I write the sequence of moves down, and then when I go to practices and stuff, a lot of the people will not remember what the sequence was, but I'll remember it because I've written it down. Sometimes I'll even like print it out if I've typed it in. I'll be like, yeah, this is the sequence right here, like referring to my notes and then practicing. And so like a lot of people make fun of me for that because it's like, man, you take this like way too seriously. But it's like, if I'm gonna pay money to like go to this class and like learn these moves, I don't want to forget them the minute I exit the class. I actually want these moves that I can use in like a social setting and, you know, apply. And so
Yep.
yeah, I think how you do anything is how you do everything. So try to make that a part of your personality. And if you find that it's not really a part of your personality, try to surround yourself with more people that think this way, and then slowly you start inching towards that, right? You're the average of the five
Agreed.
people you surround yourself with. And
Yeah.
the area in which I was always a bit slack that I'm realizing now has led to like you know the weight gain stuff that I was talking about before was I always looked at tracking macros and tracking calories as this like pain in the ass task that I don't want to do. So I'd like go to the
Yep.
gym. I'd be like, okay, for this like 45 minutes that I'm at the gym, I'm pushing myself. I'm like remembering what did I do last week? I did like 8 reps of this. I'm gonna try to do 9, and you know, I'm gonna really like put in some effort. But then the minute I leave the gym, I'm like, okay, I'm done with my health for the day. And then if I see like, you know, a burrito shop on the way back home, yeah, I'll grab that burrito. Oh yeah, like look, burrito's kind of spicy, so I'll grab a donut as well. And like you don't realize like how many
Whoa.
calories you just had, and that workout did not make up for the amount of calories that you just had. So you know, I was always doing stuff like that. And I was very active, which is why I didn't like, you know,
Yeah.
blow up. And you know didn't get to like dangerously heavy or anything like that, but yeah, compared to like you know where you're at with your physique and stuff like that, definitely was never there because of that attitude towards tracking my macros. And now like I'm working with a coach, and his standards, because he's like competing for like bodybuilding and stuff like that, is like
Oh, yeah, yeah. It's
really
like way
really high, right?
high.
So it's
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
really
yeah.
interesting. Like I check in with him every week, and I tell him like, oh look, I did pretty well. Like I met my targets for like 5 days out of the 7 or something like that. And for me, like where I came from of like not tracking anything, 5 days out of 7 is like A plus.
It's not bad. Yep.
Whereas for him, it's like, oh, nah, man, like you end up taking some steps back. Like imagine how good it could have been if you were like 7 out of 7. You know, you could have like got to your goals like in twice the time and stuff. And so when he talks to me like that, I'm like, you're right. You know what? I could have done better in this area. And some people will listen to this and be like, no, that's like unhealthy, that's like too hardcore or whatever. It's like no, it's whatever you set your standard to. So his standards is up here, my standards is here, and maybe you're judging me from a place like down here where you're not tracking anything and you're going like, hey, you're doing kind of well, Marty. So it's like if I want to increase my standards, and at the end of the day the only person that benefits is me from this, right? It's my health at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to kind of listen to him, take a leaf out of his book of like the high standards that he puts for himself with his health and nutrition, and like whatever other people think. I mean, that's their problem. You can never make other people's opinions like you know your
True.
priority, and then you can you know upskill in that way. So I guess I've talked the big talk in this podcast. At some point, I'm gonna have to reveal the transformation when I'm ready. But I think
Yeah, I want to
this
see. I mean, I want to
dude,
see it, man. Like,
this year I've already lost over 4 kilos in less than 4 weeks. So yeah, I'm on track for a pretty big transformation in a few months' time, I'd say.
sometimes I wish that we could swap like problems because
Yeah.
I can't gain weight. Well, not no, that's a lie. I find it challenging to gain weight.
Okay.
For
What?
me to lose weight, I can lose it. Like,
Really?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
dude.
yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
like for competition, I had to come down to 81 and I was 84.
Yep.
Within like 2 weeks, I managed to lose it.
Yep.
And that's not even me like tracking or anything. I just like, oh, I'll just not eat supper.
Oh, dude. Okay. Yeah.
I literally just like didn't eat supper,
Yeah.
in the gym, trained a little bit more. Yeah, that was it. That was really it.
You know what I think this might be, and like I'm not a nutritionist, by any stretch of the imagination, but maybe it's because your body composition is what it is. Like you are low percentage body fat, high muscle,
Nah.
and a lot of like muscle requires a lot of fuel. So even though you're fueling yourself you're just not fueling it to the amount that it needs to maintain that weight, and so you just drop easily.
Yes, yes, but I've always been like a skinny kid. So I've always
Ah,
had this like propensity for just being skinny.
okay, interesting. Yeah,
Yeah. So like from where I
yeah,
started at 67 kilos 10 years ago now.
yeah.
67 at this height,
Ah, okay, yeah, gotcha. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And then now I'm like 83.
yeah. I understand.
I
Right.
wish I could be heavier though. But my coach is like, no, you need to stay as 81 to
Okay.
compete. I'm like, oh man. But anyways, yes, I wish we could do that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think the quote that you said before, how you do one thing is how you do everything,
Mm,
is a good place to end the podcast.
yeah,
How
absolutely.
you do one thing is how you do everything. I didn't used to agree with that at the time that I first heard it, but now I actually do. With hindsight and wisdom, I do. I
Fantastic,
would
man.
agree with
Yeah,
that.
now that's great. I feel like we did tap into all three of those aspects of the three P's. So yeah, I'm happy to call it a day as well, man. Thank you for your time. It's been 5 lovely episodes. Not
It's been
sure
fun.
when we'll do the sixth one, but to all the listeners that have been listening up until this point, thank you so much for your support. Please subscribe to the channel, whether you're listening on Spotify or on YouTube. And yeah, feel free to get in touch with us, give us some
Yeah.
feedback if you've been enjoying the show, what parts of it you enjoy, what things you want to learn more about, what things you want to hear less about. You know, we're happy to hear all
Yeah.
of your
Tell us.
feedback. Absolutely. All right. Thanks very much, Nick. Take care.
Done. Ciao.